All right, history buffs. Welcome back for part 2 of our deep dive into modern Indian history.
Part 2?
This one's especially for our UPSC aspirants, but hey, anyone who loves a good historical yarn, stick around.
Absolutely.
Be sure to hit subscribe and like if you find this deep dive helpful.
That's right. Helps us out a lot.
Last time we covered, well, kind of set the scene.
The early days, yeah.
Yeah, the early stages of the British in India. But now we're stepping into the 19th century.
Things are heating up.
It's a battleground, but not like, with armies and stuff.
A battle of ideas.
This is the Orientalist-Anglicist Controversy.
Ooh, that's a mouthful.
It's a clash that shaped India's future, and not always in ways you'd expect.
No, not at all.
So imagine you're an Indian student back then.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
What kind of education would get you ready for the future?
Right, what's going to set me up for success?
That's the question at the heart of it all.
Okay, I'm hooked already.
So on one side, we've got the Orientalists.
Our champions of tradition.
They're all about traditional Indian knowledge.
Sanskrit, Arabic, Persian, all those classic texts.
Passed down for centuries.
It's an incredible heritage.
But the Orientalists, they weren't just stuck in the past.
No, they had a real vision.
They saw the value in keeping India's cultural heritage alive.
The languages, the unique ways of thinking.
They worried that if everyone just went with Western education,
Oh, it'd be like erasing what makes India unique.
like a cultural colonization almost.
That's a powerful way to put it. Not just political or economic, but taking over the very mind of India.
They saw it as a threat, absolutely.
They believed progress had to come from India's own traditions.
To them, cutting those roots would weaken the nation.
But then you've got the other side, the Anglicists.
Our modernizers.
They were all about bringing in Western education.
And especially the English language.
It's like they're saying English is the key. It'll unlock India's potential.
Especially in this, rapidly changing world.
Gotta modernize, gotta keep up. And to be fair to the Anglicists,
Yeah, there's always two sides to the story.
many of them truly believed they were offering a path to progress.
A way for Indians to engage with the British.
Participate in the administration even.
So maybe it's not so black and white.
Not at all. Good guys, bad guys. It's never that simple.
The both sides had their own hopes, anxieties about India's future.
Exactly. The Orientalists worried about losing their culture.
And the Anglicists, they saw themselves as building a bridge to a wider world.
But I mean, that world was ruled by the British.
Right, like, would they have been so pro-English if things were different?
That's a question worth asking.
Okay, so we've got these two sides.
Two very different ideas about education.
But how did this play out in the real world?
Like, what were they actually saying to convince people?
To change policies and all that?
So the Orientalists, they argued that neglecting traditional languages,
Right, the Sanskrit, the Arabic?
it would cut India off from its heritage.
Like losing a part of yourself?
They believed an education rooted in those languages.
Homegrown knowledge.
It was vital for national pride, cultural continuity.
They even pointed to all the incredible systems India had developed.
Logic, philosophy, science, going back centuries.
It wasn't just sentimentality. They were saying, look what we've got.
Yeah, we have something valuable here.
Something to build on. Now, on the Anglicist side, they were all about
Practicality, progress.
English education would open doors, get you better jobs.
Especially in the British administration, which was growing rapidly.
It was their way to modernize India.
Catch up with the West in science and technology.
But wasn't there also this feeling like they saw Western knowledge as better?
Oh, absolutely. That was definitely part of it.
Like that quote from Lord Macaulay, right?
Yeah, yes, Lord Macaulay.
He said something like, one shelf of European books is worth more than.
The entire body of Oriental learning.
Yeah, pretty bold statement.
He's a key figure here.
And his famous minutes from 1835, they really pushed the Anglicist cause.
They became like the guiding principle.
He championed Western science, Western literature, all taught in English.
He truly believed in its superiority.
Okay, so Macaulay comes in, makes this big declaration.
And things start shifting.
But how did they see this new system working?
Did they really think they could teach English to everyone in India?
That seems like a massive undertaking.
Well, this is where the downward filtration theory comes in.
Oh, that doesn't sound too promising.
Yeah, it's one of those ideas that hasn't aged well.
Sounds kind of condescending, like educate the elite, hope it trickles down.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Not exactly a recipe for equality.
The thinking was that this select group, educated in English,
They'd spread the knowledge.
eventually enlightening everyone. Of course, reality is a bit more complicated.
Yeah, I bet. Sounds like it could create more problems than it solves.
That's a story for our next deep dive.
Stay tuned for part 2, folks. We'll see how this all played out.
We'll uncover those unintended consequences.
It's going to get really interesting, trust me.
Don't miss it. Okay, so last time, remember, the Anglicists, they were on a roll.
They were really pushing that English education.
Seemed like they were going to reshape India, but...
There's always a but with history, isn't there?
There is. It wasn't all smooth sailing. This victory, it came with some, well, baggage.
Unintended consequences, maybe.
You could say that. So picture this. English is now the language of administration, higher education.
It's how you get ahead.
And it creates this whole new class of Indians, the English-educated elite.
The movers and shakers.
They can navigate the colonial system, you know?
Get the good jobs.
Argue with the British on their own terms.
Sounds like they had it made.
In some ways, yeah. But let's not forget about the Orientalists' concerns.
What about everyone else? Did that downward filtration thing actually work?
Yes. The downward filtration theory?
It sounded a bit iffy, if I'm honest.
It did, didn't it? Good in theory, but, well, reality is a bit messier.
I'm sensing a problem here.
What happened is it actually widened the gap.
Between the elite and everyone else.
Exactly. Those who had access to English education and those who didn't.
A tale as old as time, isn't it? Best intentions pave the road to, well...
Not always the best outcomes.
You try to modernize, but end up creating new inequalities. It's kind of ironic.
It happens all the time in colonial history.
Progress, but at a cost.
And in this case, the cost was a divided society.
So we've got this elite speaking English, comfortable with the British.
But what about the rest of India? Did they just go along with it?
Hard to imagine everyone was happy about that.
Oh, not at all. Remember, Indian society was and is incredibly diverse.
Different languages, religions, social structures.
This Anglicist victory didn't just wipe all that away.
People pushed back.
They did. It sparked all kinds of reactions. Some adapted, some resisted. New movements emerged.
This is interesting.
Absolutely.
It's not just dates and names anymore. We're talking about social change.
The forces that shape a nation's identity.
This is important stuff for our UPSC folks, right?
It is. It's all there in GS1 Modern History.
So tell me about these reactions. Who are the big players?
Well, you have figures like Raja Ram Mohan Roy.
He was a big deal, right?
Very influential, often called the father of modern India.
And he was all about reform.
He was, but he was also deeply influenced by Western ideas.
It's like trying to find that balance.
Exactly. Holding on to your own traditions while embracing new ideas.
Not just copying the West, but adapting it to India.
A kind of cultural fusion. Creating something uniquely Indian.
And that's where the Bengal Renaissance comes in, right?
You got it. This incredible period of intellectual growth.
New ideas bubbling up everywhere.
Thinkers, writers, reformers, all challenging the old norms.
And this is all happening alongside the Anglicist victory.
That's the thing. It's not the end of the story.
It's more like the beginning of a whole new chapter.
Precisely. And here's where we see the resilience of Indian culture.
They didn't just give up on their own languages and knowledge.
No way. That desire to preserve their heritage, it was still there.
Just simmering under the surface.
Leading to movements that championed regional languages, indigenous ways of knowing.
So even though English was dominant,
The Orientalist spirit never really went away.
it continued to shape the intellectual landscape.
Absolutely. And here's another crucial point. This debate, it wasn't just some historical footnote.
It had real consequences.
It did. It shaped the entire Indian education system.
Right. We can't forget about our UPSC friends.
They need to know this stuff.
So how did it play out in the classrooms?
Well, think about it. The focus on English education,
There's a big shift.
it led to new schools, universities, all modeled on Western institutions.
The British way of doing things. It's amazing how a debate from way back then, the 1800s, can still feel so relevant today.
It really does, doesn't it?
We're still asking those same questions.
Like, what's the right mix?
English and Indian languages, how to make our education system,
Reflect our own values, yeah.
but also, get students ready for the whole global scene.
It's a balancing act.
Almost like Lord Macaulay's ghost is still hanging around.
Haunting the classrooms.
Because think about it, English, it's still a ticket to a better life, right?
Definitely opens doors.
To colleges, better jobs, even just moving up in the world.
And that's exactly why this whole debate, it's not just history.
Nope, it's still shaping India today.
Big time. So let's do a quick recap for our listeners, especially our UPSC folks.
What are the big takeaways here? What do we absolutely got to remember?
Okay, so first off, this debate, It shows us how culture, power, education, they were all tangled up during British rule.
It was about way more than just textbooks.
Absolutely. It was a fight for India's identity under colonial rule.
A reminder that education, it's never neutral.
Never. There's always power dynamics at play, cultural assumptions.
And this debate, it also shows how Indians responded to colonialism.
It wasn't just passively accepting everything.
They were active, engaged,
Critically thinking about British ideas, adapting them.
even using those ideas to challenge the British.
That's right.
It's a story of resilience, adapting to a world that's changing like crazy.
And for our UPSC friends, this is gold for your modern history prep.
GS1.
You need to know both sides of this debate, the key players, what happened afterward,
Not just memorizing facts, it's about understanding the why, the how,
the forces that shaped modern India.
and how those historical threads connect us to today.
Because this debate, it's still relevant.
We're talking language policy, educational equality, what it even means to be Indian in this globalized world.
Wow, we covered a lot today.
We went from those old colonial
Think
universities.
of the challenges India faces today.
So much to think about, but we always like to leave you with a little something extra.
A question to ponder. Keep that brain buzzing.
All right, lay it on us.
Okay, imagine this. You're back in the 1800s, right there in the middle of this debate.
Oh, this is good.
Knowing what you know now about colonialism, development, cultural identity,
Ooh, tough choices.
which side would you choose? Orientalists or Anglicists?
That's a real head scratcher. We're basically asking our listeners to step back in time.
Put yourselves in their shoes. What would you have done?
It's like you get to be part of history, maybe even change things.
We'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you? Any burning questions? Share them.
And of course, subscribe and like. We'll be back with another deep dive into Indian history soon.
More exciting stories to uncover. Until then, keep exploring.
Keep learning.